Sarah Bedford of the Washington Examiner joined. She covers Congress. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back. Tommy Tuberville is about to get scored on in the red zone. The Republicans are going to move with the Democrats to change the rules concerning career military promotions because there are 450 on ice. It's screwing up the military. It's endangering national security. And I'm pro-life as any of them. And a bunch of people with a 100% pro-life scores are going to vote against Tuberville. Is he going to take the off-ramp, Sarah?
You know, at this point, I don't know that he is. I mean, obviously, he's undeterred by the fact that a growing number of members of his own party are critical of this approach. And he has inflicted considerable pain with this approach so far, right? I mean, very clearly he's agitating leaders of the Pentagon, the Biden administration. He's gotten the White House's attention. And even then, it hasn't been enough leverage to get his problem addressed, his problem with the fact that the Pentagon wants to pay for military service members to get abortions across state lines. That's not going addressed. And so clearly this tactic isn't effective at this point. So whether he will take the off-ramp, I think obviously a different question than whether he should, which is pretty clear at this point that it's not being effective.
Well, Democrats have I have some admiration for their skill in this. They don't care about the military either, but they don't mind if Tuberville sets himself on fire and burns up the Republican credibility with the career military. They're happy to see that happen. They don't care about these men and women who are in colonel, lieutenant colonel, and above positions who are being screwed up, or their families or their staffs. They don't care. They know that it's hurting the Republicans with a core constituency. I'm just curious what you think. They're going to at least find 10 Republicans to vote with the Democrats to pass a resolution changing the Senate rules. It's the nuclear option. And Tommy Tuberville, how many do you think will join those 10?
You know, it's unclear at this point because those frustrations with Republicans had been simmering under the surface for so long, and it just took a sort of critical mass of a handful of Senate Republicans to start speaking out for more of them to feel comfortable. But I do think the number of Republican senators who are frustrated with this tactic is greater than the number of those who have spoken out. So you could see 15 or more. I think it's a really good point about the Democrats that you just made, right? Because there were procedural things that they could have done along the way to get some of these nominations passed. They could have taken it to the floor. They could have not held out for unanimous consent for some of these. The thing is that they didn't do that because tactically, maybe it was more helpful for them to let Tuberville hang out to dry, twist in the wind, and take a lot of heat for this politically.
Yeah, if your political opponent is busy destroying themselves, don't get involved. And that's like one of the oldest rules in politics. So they've watched Tommy Tuberville set on fire himself and the Republican caucus. I'm just curious whether or not the Republican caucus, I know Mike Lee is with Tuberville, and I imagine there are a couple of others. But I don't think if 47 of them go with the Democrats, I think the message would be, this was really a bad idea, and we hung out with this guy as long as we could, but we're not going down with it. We're not going Thelma and Louise on this issue. So it really is going to be a fascinating vote.
I think what's happened is that Republicans have now successfully been able to sort of decouple the pro-life abortion part from the procedural part, which is why Tuberville got away with this for so long without criticism from his fellow Republicans. None of them wanted to come off as insufficiently pro-life, right, or seeming to side with the Democrats on the Pentagon's abortion policy. But now I think the argument has been successfully made by other members of the GOP conference that, you can be pro-life and you can really oppose this Pentagon policy without supporting this type of tactic to get it changed. And now that argument has been made and nobody's really disputing it, and the media is not even really challenging it, nor are fellow conservatives, I think that you could see a really large number of Republicans come out and oppose Tuberville because there's not a real price to pay for doing that at this point.
No, I agree. I hope the number is closing in on 48. I don't expect Mike Lee to abandon Tuberville, but I wouldn't mind if every other Republican did. Sarah, quickly, where is Israel funding? I know that it's coupled with cutting back the IRS. I know it makes the Democrats crazy, but the funding is urgent. Is that going to get through this week with the IRS cuts to pay for it?
With this week, with the holidays, I don't think so. Johnson sent everybody home, but it's just a really fascinating dynamic that McConnell seems to be behind, getting Ukraine funding over the finish line no matter what it takes. And that is just sort of dead on arrival in the House. And Johnson, that would be a very risky thing for him to push in his first month as speaker when his conference has said pretty loudly and clearly they're not going to consider this package as long as Ukraine aid is attached to it.
It's interesting though. They asked for the IRS cut, so Mike Johnson wins. If everybody wants the Israeli aid, more than half of the Republicans want the Ukrainian aid, and everybody in the Republican caucus wants the IRS cuts. So you put those three things together, and I do think it gets through the House. Sarah, is that how it's going to end up getting to the House with those three things together?
It very possibly could, but I think that the number of Republicans in the House who would be opposed to having them all together is maybe larger than folks realize. There's a lot of real discomfort with that.
We will see. Sarah Bedford, always a pleasure having you on. Watch Sarah C. Bedford on X. Read everything she writes for the Washington Examiner.